Who gave you permission to touch that rifle?" The words ripped across Ironveil Range like a crack of thunder. Master Sergeant Cole Briggs's voice carried the weight of decades, but the mocking smirk on his face gave it away. He thought this was a joke. His eyes were fixed on Riley Monroe, crouched quietly at the firing line. She hadn't been issued an M24. She wasn't on any sniper roster. Officially, she was nothing more than a logistics clerk paperwork. Ammo counts, serial numbers. The kind of soldier no one remembered 5 minutes after walking past. Yet there she was, her hands resting on a weapon reserved for America's elite marksmen. The rifle had been checked into the armory that morning for maintenance, left briefly unattended at the firing line. The laughter started fast, rolling down the line like a contagion. Delta trainees elbowed each other. SEAL operators chuckled under their breath. And even the Rangers joined in, all united by one shared assumption: Riley didn't belong here. She was the supply clerk, the one who checked their ammo boxes and signed off gear requisitions. Nothing more. But she didn't flinch. Calmly. She brushed a strand of hair back, studying the M24's bolt assembly as though reacquainting herself with an old friend. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a silent calculation flickering across her face. She adjusted the scope with practiced ease, then settled lower into position, her movement so deliberate it silenced the nearest heckler for half a breath. The air around her changed. Ironveil Range was alive with chaos, rifle cracks echoing like rolling thunder, shouted corrections bouncing off the concrete walls, boots scuffing across sandbags. Yet Riley moved inside that storm like it wasn't even there. Her world narrowed to steel, glass, and the faint rhythm of her own breathing. Briggs stepped closer, his voice heavy with condescension. "That rifle's not for you. Soldier. Where'd you even get the idea you could touch it?" His tone wasn't just a reprimand. It was dismissal, the reflex of a man used to keeping people in their place. The laughter came harder this time, circling like wolves around a wounded deer. "Supply clerks playing sniper," one ranger called out. "She probably doesn't even know which end the bullet comes out of." Another sneered. But Riley gave them nothing. No defense, no excuses, just quiet steps toward the weapon. Her fingers slid across the cold steel like a pianist brushing ivory keys. No fumbling, no uncertainty. Every movement spoke of muscle memory, hours of repetition hidden from the world. The jokes grew louder, but so did the unease. A few soldiers began watching closer now, frowns forming. Something about the way she handled that rifle didn't look like play acting. It looked like routine. She cycled the bolt once smooth, flawless, tested the trigger with a feather-light press, adjusted the bipod by millimeters only a true sniper would care about. And suddenly, the laughter didn't sound so confident anymore. By the time Riley lowered herself into the prone position, a hush had settled over Ironveil Range. No one wanted to admit it yet. But every man standing there could feel it. This wasn't going to end the way they thought, and none of them were ready for the first shot. You're watching Quiet Valor Stories. Report in. Soldier, tell us your city in the comments. Subscribe and stay in formation for what comes next. Riley Monroe lowered herself into the prone position with a calm that unsettled even the veterans watching. She moved like someone who had already fought this battle 1,000 times in silence. What they saw as ignorance was something else entirely, history locked behind clearance codes they'd never touch. To them, she was a technician with a clipboard. To herself, she was something far more dangerous. The air shifted. The constant rhythm of gunfire and shouted corrections dulled, as if the range itself understood something was unfolding that shouldn't be interrupted. Master Sergeant Cole Briggs's frown deepened. But for once, he said nothing. Perhaps he sensed that ordering her up would only reveal a weakness he couldn't afford. A marksman with too much confidence leaned against the sandbags, smirking. "Go on, then. Clerk, show us what a supply tech can do." We could use the laugh. The others chuckled, feeding on each other's mockery, eager to watch her fail. Riley ignored them. She adjusted her body until she and the rifle seemed fused, breathing so steady it resembled meditation. Every shift of her hand, every angle of her arm, was deliberate, not one movement wasted. They expected clumsy fumbling. They expected nerves. Instead, they saw patience. They saw control. Her finger touched the trigger with the gentleness of someone who understood that accuracy wasn't about brute force. It was about harmony. The M24 was no longer just steel and carbon fiber. It was an extension of her pulse, her breath, her will. Then the shot broke. The sound cut through the range like a verdict, silencing every laugh in an instant. Soldiers turned to the monitor. The round had punched straight through the bullseye at 1,000 yards, a shot so clean, so impossibly perfect. It looked less like marksmanship and more like fate. For the first time that day, Ironveil Range fell utterly silent. A ranger blinked twice, convinced it was a fluke. A SEAL muttered under his breath, "No way." That's no way. Even Briggs, who had seen his share of talent, felt the bottom drop out of his certainty. Riley cycled the bolt with a metallic snap that echoed like a declaration. No celebration, no self-satisfied smirk, just the cold, mechanical calm of someone preparing for the next kill. The second round landed inches from the first, the third carving a grouping so tight it looked like a single ragged tear on the screen. Not even the best snipers on the range had ever done it so effortlessly. The bravado evaporated. Faces once painted with laughter now carried unease. Eyes darted between each other, searching for an explanation. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a clerk fumbling her way into a miracle. This was mastery. And as Riley rose slightly from the scope, her eyes calm, unshaken, it struck the men around her she wasn't proving anything. She was reminding them. The metallic snap of boots on concrete carried across the range then, heavy and deliberate, every head turned. A new silence fell. General Stratton had arrived, and when his eyes locked on Riley Monroe behind the M24, the color drained from his face. The range was still holding its breath when the sound of heavy boots cut through the silence. Each step carried weight, authority, the kind of rhythm every soldier instinctively straightened to. General Stratton entered Ironveil Range with the stride of a man who had never needed to explain his presence. For decades, he had been the most formidable figure in any room. But halfway across the floor, his confidence faltered. His eyes locked on Riley Monroe, still prone behind the M24. The color drained from his weathered face. He had seen that stance before, the way her elbows anchored, the way her breathing disappeared into the rifle, the way her entire being became a weapon. His lips parted as if to demand the rifle be returned at once, but the words never came. Instead, his voice cracked through the suffocating quiet. "Where did you get that rifle?" It wasn't a command. It wasn't even an accusation. It was recognition haunted, reluctant, edged with disbelief. The soldiers around him looked from Stratton to Riley, confusion rippling across their faces. They expected anger, maybe punishment. Instead, what they heard was the tone of a man confronting something he thought was buried forever, because he had seen it long ago. A memory surged from the locked vault of his mind. A night in the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan, his unit trapped in a valley. 22 operators pinned under relentless enemy fire. No escape routes, no hope. Death had closed in from every angle. And then shots, not random bursts, not lucky guesses. Precision that seemed to bend reality. One after another, enemy marksmen fell, erased before they even understood where death had come from. 7 confirmed kills at distances well beyond 200 meters. Every shot under conditions that should have made accuracy impossible. That night had been scrubbed from official record before sunrise. Reports sealed, logs redacted. The shooter's name cut from every file and buried under classifications no one dared to challenge. The world was told nothing had happened. But Stratton remembered. He remembered the voice on the radio, the whispered call sign no one was supposed to repeat. He remembered the certainty that someone extraordinary had walked among them and vanished. Now, watching Riley, he knew beyond doubt the ghost had returned. Excellence doesn't ask for permission. It simply reveals itself. The whispers began almost immediately, spreading through the range like fire on dry grass. Who is she really? How could a logistics clerk shoot like that? Did you see the general's face by the time the echoes of her third shot had faded? Rumor was racing across Ironveil base faster than gunfire. Personnel files were pulled, but all they showed were administrative duties, inventory logs, supply reports, requisition forms. Nothing suggested she had ever held anything deadlier than a clipboard. Yet the digital scoring system left no room for doubt. The proof was recorded in flawless precision. Stratton stood frozen, trapped between duty and memory. He saw more details no one else could memories stored in classified corners of his mind. And with each second, the unease in the room thickened. Because if Riley Monroe was who he thought she was, then Ironveil wasn't just hosting a supply clerk, it was sheltering a weapon disguised as a soldier. The same soldiers who had mocked Riley Monroe minutes earlier now shifted their weight uneasily, their bravado dissolving like smoke. They weren't standing beside a clerk anymore. They had been standing beside a predator, cloaked in fatigues, masked by silence. Every joke, every dismissive glance, now felt like a mistake carved into stone. Riley gave them nothing in return. She didn't revel in their shock. She didn't even look at them. With the same efficient precision she had shown in her shooting, she cleared the rifle, racked it back into place, and reached for her clipboard. To her, it was as if the last 10 minutes were nothing more than a pause between lines of inventory. That silence was heavier than boasting, sharper than threats. It forced every man in that room to confront the truth. Competence didn't need to declare itself. It only had to reveal itself once. General Stratton stood motionless, his face pale and unreadable, but his stare said more than classified files ever could. She wasn't an accident. She wasn't misplaced in logistics. She was here for a reason, though none of them had clearance high enough to understand it. The air inside Ironveil Range thickened, the kind of tension that raised gooseflesh on the back of necks. Even the most arrogant soldiers now carried the same thought. They hadn't just underestimated her. They had been dangerously naive. From that day forward, the base itself felt different. Ironveil Range no longer echoed with easy laughter. The ground carried a hum, an invisible charge, as if her shots had left a current running through the sandbags and steel. Routine drills felt heavier. Every trigger squeeze came with a new awareness of just how far short they all fell. When Riley passed through the halls, voices dropped into whispers. Salutes snapped sharper, too crisp for someone ranked as low as her file suggested. Curiosity burned in the eyes of many, but caution restrained their tongues. A few brave souls tried to ask who she really was. Most never dared. They sensed instinctively that some truths were not theirs to carry, that asking might cost more than ignorance. The sharpest among them realized something else. Ignorance might be the only safeguard they had. General Stratton never offered an explanation. His clearance bound him to silence, chained him to missions that never officially existed. He didn't need to speak. His expression at the range had been enough. When a full general stared at a logistics clerk with fear and reverence, only fools ignored the message. Whispers spread like wildfire, in the mess hall, in the barracks, even in the motor pool. Stories mutated with every retelling. She used to be in Delta. She was loaned to CIA ground branch. She's not even Army. She's part of a black program no one talks about. No two versions matched, but they all carried the same thread. Riley Monroe wasn't who her record said she was. Personnel files were pulled again and again. Each time they showed the same blank slate administrative duties, supply counts, clerical tasks. But everyone had seen the automated scoring system with their own eyes. There was no denying it. She had carved a grouping into the target so flawless it looked manufactured, and Stratton's silence only deepened the mystery. His refusal to explain became an answer in itself. The soldiers who had once joked now measured every word around her. They stepped with precision when she passed, as though afraid that even a misstep might draw her attention. The atmosphere at Ironveil tilted on its axis, altered permanently by a woman who had said nothing and fired only 3 shots. Riley remained quiet, clipboard in hand, eyes steady, moving through the base like nothing had changed, but everything had, because everyone now understood the real danger wasn't what she had shown them. It was what she had chosen not to. They whispered about Riley Monroe, the woman with the M24 who had made General Stratton freeze as though he'd seen a ghost step out of the armory. Some swore she had once been embedded with SEAL Team 6. Others claimed she was part of a black program so deep it didn't officially exist. The truth was buried where few would ever have clearance to look, but the impact could not be buried. One demonstration had rewritten the entire social order at Ironveil Base. Overnight, Riley shifted from overlooked supply tech to someone respected not because of stripes or rank, but because of undeniable ability. She never asked for it. She never flaunted it. She never even spoke about what she had done. Clipboard in hand, uniform squared away, she moved through the halls the same way she always had, steady, quiet, professional. Only now, the air around her changed as she passed. Conversations fell into hushes. Salutes snapped sharper, the kind usually reserved for veterans whose stories carried scars of impossible survival. The jokes about a clerk pretending to be a soldier vanished. In their place grew something heavier, a new understanding that job titles didn't define the full weight of the person wearing the uniform. Respect wasn't tied to paperwork or medals pinned on a chest. Respect was forged in the silence of competence. The firing range itself became something close to sacred ground. Soldiers drifted there in off hours, staring at the lane where she had lain prone. They retold the story in fragments: 3 shots, 1 hole. A general's pale face. Even the M24 she touched felt different in other hands, as if her presence had etched itself into the steel. Every practice session carried new weight. Every young marksman unconsciously measured themselves against the impossible bar she had set, and though no one could match it, the attempt alone sharpened their resolve. Riley never sought to use her moment as leverage. She never angled for special treatment, never demanded an easier post, never dropped hints about who she had been before. That restraint was more powerful than any boast. Her silence became legend, in a world where so many fought to be noticed. Riley Monroe carried the ultimate authority, the respect born of pure competence, and the quiet fear that follows true power restrained. She didn't need to remind anyone of what she had done. They reminded themselves every time their eyes drifted to her in a hallway, or when the crack of gunfire echoed across Ironveil and they wondered if they could ever match it. Some truths don't arrive with explanations. Some legends don't need an introduction. Riley Monroe had shown them all that sometimes the sharpest authority comes from the person who doesn't speak at all. And from that day forward, no one at Ironveil Base ever looked at the woman with the clipboard the same way again. In the end, Ironveil learned a lesson every battlefield teaches: respect isn't spoken. It's earned.